Why should you vote for me? Because I do not wear high heels. My boots, they have real on them.
I am pro-life, and I'll answer the next question. I don't believe in the exceptions of rape or incest.
That man is not a United States senator from Colorado, although he tried really hard to be. The last midterm elections were in 2010. That, of course, was a really, really good year for Republicans. And in the great purple state of Colorado that year, not many people thought that in that 2010 election, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet had a very good chance of holding on to his seat. Michael Bennet had been appointed to the Senate in 2009 when Senator Ken Salazar got named to President Obama's cabinet. By the following year, by 2010, it was sort of looking like it might be the end of the road for appointed Senator Michael Bennet. Midterm elections are always hard for the president's party, and he was a Democrat. The first 2 years of the Obama presidency had Obamacare and all the rest of it. It was clear that it was going to be a really big Republican year. Colorado was a really ripe potential pickup. Michael Bennet had never had to run statewide the first time around to get the seat. He was just appointed to it. He was kind of a low-profile guy even before he was appointed. Once he got to Washington, he stayed kind of low-profile. So a lot of people thought Michael Bennet was going to lose that U.S. Senate seat to the Republicans in 2010. But then the Republicans nominated this guy. They nominated Ken Buck to be Michael Bennet's Republican opponent. And it turns out that was a terrible idea for the Republicans, even in a blood-red year like 2010. In 2008 and again in 2010, Colorado anti-abortion activists had succeeded in getting onto the ballot a really radical anti-abortion ballot measure. It would make all abortion criminal at any stage in pregnancy and for any reason. And because its means of banning all abortion was to define a fertilized egg as a fully grown human person, those ballot measures arguably would have also made it illegal to use the most popular forms of birth control in this country, including the pill. Ken Buck supported that in Colorado. He supported that specifically in the year he was running for Senate in 2010. And Colorado voters really did not agree with him on that. They really strongly did not agree. Now, these were the results of that personhood ballot measure in Colorado in 2008 and 2010. And even though Colorado voters hated it by margins that huge, Ken Buck was all for it. And Michael Bennet made him pay for that in that Senate race over and over and over again.
I'm pro-choice. As the father of 3 little girls, I don't think the government has any business telling them how to make these incredibly painful decisions that ought to be made by a woman with her family and with her clergy and with her doctor. I find it amazing that people that are always talking about getting government out of our hair want it making the most intimate decisions that can possibly be made. And I certainly wouldn't support any legislation that restricted abortion in cases of rape or incest.
That was in 2010. And Michael Bennet beat Ken Buck to hold on to his United States Senate seat. His overall margin of victory in Colorado that year was 1 point, but his margin of victory among women was 17 points. Lesson learned. Maybe. This year, the other U.S. Senate seat from Colorado is up, not the one held by Michael Bennet, but the one held by Mark Udall. And again, it's another midterm election year, and midterms are always tough for the president's party, and Mark Udall's a Democrat. Mark Udall is a widely respected senator. He's taken very seriously in Washington. But like Michael Bennet, honestly, he's not a hugely high-profile guy. And Colorado is still basically seen as a purple state. So a lot of the same dynamics apply as applied in 2010 in terms of the Democrats worrying about holding on to this seat. But great news for the Democrats. The Republicans decided that their candidate for the U.S. Senate, again, is going to be Ken Buck. Ha! Ken Buck already lost to Michael Bennet. Now he can lose to Mark Udall on the same grounds, too. That was the initial Republican plan for the Senate seat in Colorado this year. For a long time, they were planning to run Ken Buck against Mark Udall, so he could lose twice. The Republicans, though, then later came to their senses and realized they were about to drive into the same brick wall twice. And so after putting Ken Buck up as their candidate, earlier this spring, they decided to make a weird switcheroo. It was a very strange thing. It had been that Ken Buck was going to be running statewide against Mark Udall for Senate. Second-term Congressman Cory Gardner, the guy who represents this district in Colorado, was going to run for re-election in his super safe, super overwhelmingly Republican district. That had been the original plan, but Colorado Republicans decided to switch them. So they're having Ken Buck run for Cory Gardner's super safe, super conservative congressional seat, and they're going to have Congressman Cory Gardner not run for re-election there and instead try to get into the Senate. A switcheroo like that is rare and strange, but at least it did relieve Colorado Republicans of the burden of having Ken Buck as their statewide candidate again. The problem for Colorado Republicans is that Cory Gardner has all of the same problems that Ken Buck did.
Mr. Gardner?
Thank you. I have signed the personhood petition. I have taken the petitions to my church and circulating it in my church, and I have a legislative record that backs up my support for life.
Cory Gardner, like Ken Buck, was a strong supporter of those two Colorado personhood ban birth control measures that crashed and burned in the state by more than 40 points. When he was a state lawmaker, he'd also co-sponsored an outright abortion ban for Colorado with no exception for women who were pregnant because they'd been raped or were the victims of incest. It would have put doctors who did abortions in prison for up to 12 years. That was his legislation at the state level. That was the year before the first personhood ballot measure, which, again, he supported in 2008, and he then supported again when it was on the ballot again in 2010. When Cory Gardner got to Congress, he became a co-sponsor for a personhood bill for the whole country, a total outlaw of abortion under all circumstances at all times, and arguably outlawing the birth control pill federally. He co-sponsored that in 2012. He co-sponsored that again last year in 2013. But now, all of a sudden, after the switcheroo, he's a statewide candidate in purple state Colorado. He's not just running in his super conservative district anymore. And so now he has decided, oh, you know what? That was all a really big mistake. He did not actually take his name off the federal personhood bill officially, but he now says it was all a big misunderstanding. He didn't really get that he was supporting it before and what it meant, and he's sorry he did that. He's sorry he did it over and over again for all those years and all those different venues. He just didn't understand it. He said he doesn't understand his own legislation. And the I don't understand my own legislation defense is a weak place from which to start. But that is where the Cory Gardner versus Mark Udall Senate campaign in Colorado has started. And you can tell that from the fact that this is Mark Udall's very first official campaign ad.
It comes down to respect for women and our lives. So Congressman Cory Gardner's history promoting harsh anti-abortion laws is disturbing. Gardner sponsored a bill to make abortion a felony, including cases of rape and incest. Gardner even championed an 8-year crusade to outlaw birth control here in Colorado. But Mark Udall protects our right to choose, our access to birth control. Mark Udall. In a word, respect.
I'm Mark Udall, and I approve this message.
Again, that is the first official campaign ad being run by Senator Mark Udall in his re-election campaign against Republican Congressman Cory Gardner. The Republicans have already switched out one candidate in this race. I think it is unlikely they will be able to do so again, but so far the response by Cory Gardner to this line of attack is not a strong response. The Gardner campaign's response to the Udall ad, and I'm going to quote here, and I do not mean to cast aspersions, I'm going to quote their official statement. Quote, "At the time, Cory was not aware that the amendment, if adopted, had the potential to ban some forms of birth control." I don't understand what I'm doing. I didn't mean it. Oops, I only understood once I wanted to run for higher office when it was inconvenient to hold that old stance. This is not a strong response for somebody who wants to be a United States senator. So the Cory Gardner campaign is in a bit of a mess. And in the middle of this mess, you want to know what happened to them this week? Worst possible thing with worst possible timing. On Tuesday of this week, you want to know who just decided to endorse Cory Gardner for Senate in Colorado? I mean, if this is your campaign problem, I swear I'm not against contraception anymore. If this is your campaign problem, who do you least want giving you a hug this week in front of everybody in Colorado? Oh, God, not Rick Santorum.
One of the things I will talk about that no president has talked about before is I think the dangers of contraception in this country. The whole sexual libertine idea. And many in the Christian faith have said, well, that's okay. I mean, contraception's okay. It's not okay because it's a license to do things in the sexual realm that is counter to how things are supposed to be.
When Rick Santorum endorsed Republican Congressman Cory Gardner in the Colorado Senate race this week, it was not Cory Gardner who put out a press release about it. It was his opponent, Mark Udall, who put out the press release saying, hey, look who just endorsed this guy. We have seen how this dynamic plays out in Colorado Senate races before, even in years that are super inhospitable to Democrats. Is this a dynamic that is only like this in Colorado, or is this going to happen all over the place this year? Hold that thought.